Story 1. The fourth grade teacher was very difficult to deal with. She was on a significant power trip and exhibited unkind behavior. For example, we had a classmate whose younger sibling, aged 1 to 2 years, had cancer. This was well known in our small town, and there were many fundraising events for the family. Sadly, the sibling passed away during the summer before fourth grade. All the parents made sure we understood not to say anything inappropriate, as everyone at school was aware of the situation. On the first day of school, I ended up in the teacher's class along with the classmate who had lost her brother. A little while into the day, my classmate began to cry. The teacher snapped at her, urging her to stop crying, saying, "What are you crying about?" My classmate replied, "I miss my brother." The teacher retorted, "You can see your brother when you go home." The entire class was taken aback. My classmate shouted, "No, I won't. He's dead." We all cringed at the exchange. The teacher did not apologize or even respond. She simply continued teaching. It was the most uncomfortable situation I had ever witnessed and set a negative tone for the rest of the year. I was glad my classmate stood up for herself. Under normal circumstances, I might have thought that perhaps the teacher would learn a lesson from this, but she seemed incapable of empathy or any human feelings. If she had paid attention or cared about her students, she would have understood. Story 2. A middle school math teacher once presented a PowerPoint he created about why a Ducati motorcycle is the most amazing thing ever. He wanted us to convince his wife to allow him to buy one. Story 3. Each of you matters, you will do something impactful. My teacher inspired me to have that same impact, hopefully on others. Story 4. My math teacher said, "If you don't understand this, that's my fault, not yours. Let's go over it again. Okay?" Story 5. Art teacher. Sometimes things get worse before they get better. Don't destroy that. I took that advice, and when I calmed down, my ceramic piece was placed in a showcase with all the sports trophies for about 2 years. I apply that advice to everything, so I hope to not lose hope. Story 6. As you are aware, many members of this class have been informed that their graduation is being withheld due to academic or disciplinary reasons. This has required some stressful conversations with parents and likely a great deal of anxiety for the students facing summer school or the prospect of repeating the 8th grade and delaying their high school careers. I have news for you. Every single one of you will be receiving a diploma 2 weeks from now. Not because you have earned it, though a few of you have and you know who you are. Not because we are giving in to the requests of your parents, though I doubt many were genuinely surprised. The reason is simple. I refuse to let you continue to represent this school with your fighting, cheating, and disrespect. I could not bring myself to subject another year of talented teachers to this class. I am not doing this as a favor. I am doing this because I have given up. This is the most delinquent, disrespectful, cruel, and dishonest class I have ever seen come through this school. If I see one of you pumping my gas, it will be too soon. To be honest, the students who would have been held back are more likely to get arrested before landing their first job. I am sure your parents will be thrilled at this news, and you can tell them whatever you want. Just know that the rest of the world will not stand in your corner like your parents do, and they will not give you a special pass like I will. Real life has consequences. That is a lesson you will learn whether you want to or not. Story 7. My junior honors English teacher told me about songwriting. The simpler you make the story, the more likely you are to write a hit. I'm still trying, and may you and your cigarettes rest in peace. Story 8. If you mix a bucket of dirty water with a bucket of clean water, the clean water does not make the dirty water clean. Instead, it is the dirty water that makes the clean water dirty. Story 9. I remember my grade 9 French immersion teacher was quite iconic in some of the things she said. I actually wrote a few down all those years ago, but my favorite is, "I'm going to call your parents and tell them there's something wrong with you." It was a joke to encourage the boys who were misbehaving to behave. However, she said it in French, which, in my opinion, makes it 10 times funnier. Story 10. No sexy vampires. This was my introduction to the writing major professor when he advised us on what not to write about in our papers this year in college. Story 11. To this day, I try to remember to check my enthusiasm because of an unforgettable moment when my band teacher dropped his baton onto his stand in a gesture of giving up. Here is what followed. Teacher, Abigail, you are leading the band down a misguided path. Me. Thank you. Teacher, that is not a good thing. Me, oh, well, it sounded pretty. Teacher, sighs. Story 12. My substitute teacher dressed up for Halloween, and my 6th and 7th grade class was absolutely dreadful to her. She looked so defeated and crushed by the students. The way all the fun and joy drained from her face as she removed her makeup and said, "Fine," was heartbreaking. I've never seen anyone so crushed for trying to do something enjoyable for us. Story 13. My high school band teacher said to the flute players, "Can you play that better?" Luckily, I wasn't a flute player. That is quite a serious roast. Story 14. During my Master of Business Administration program, my international business professor said, "Money is an energy storage system." I'm still thinking about that statement. Story 15. History teacher. Most people tend to have the same political affiliation as those around them. Sociology teacher. You are most likely to marry someone with a similar socio-economic status. I often reflect on these comments because they highlight how little we actually determine for ourselves at times. Story 16. Not explicitly stated, but my 2nd grade teacher laminated a sign next to the toilet that read, "If you sprinkle when you tinkle, be thoughtful and wipe the seat." Story 17. Filling holes with holes refers to the act of trying to catch up on one task by neglecting another. For example, doing chemistry homework during history class may help you complete the chemistry assignment, but it will cause you to fall behind on history homework. As a result, you are still behind overall and you have not made any real progress. Story 18. In middle school health education, we learned that individuals with human immunodeficiency virus could not have sexual relations. After class, I asked the teacher privately if they could simply engage in sexual relations with other individuals who also have the virus. They said they didn't know the answer. The next day, the teacher brought it up in front of the class and singled me out for asking the question. Everyone stared at me as if I had the virus, and then he followed up with, "Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Why would you bring it up again if you didn't even find out the answer?" He was an ineffective health teacher. He would wheel in the television cart and just play Saturday Night Live cheerleader sketches featuring Will Ferrell. Story 19. I remember about 65 years ago when a nun wanted to tell the children that there are people spreading despicable lies about priests. I can still recall her anger and her voice breaking into a kind of scream. Story 20. I was in 1st grade struggling to learn to read. We took turns reading in front of the class. I can't remember everything that happened, but I remember struggling to read and feeling really embarrassed. It didn't help that some of the kids laughed at me. My teacher said I wasn't paying attention and should be a better reader by now. Then she said I was being stupid, and the whole class laughed. She didn't technically call me stupid, but that's all I heard. This experience shaped my entire educational career. I found out the next year that I am severely dyslexic. I am 33 years old, and I'm still scared to read out loud. Interestingly, I have recently become a teacher and am slowly getting over that fear. I will never forget that feeling, though. Story 21. My 10th grade English teacher told me I was lazy when it came to writing papers. Looking back, I think he saw potential that no one else had seen or cared to acknowledge. He taught me how to take the thoughts from my head and put them onto paper, something for which I will always be grateful. Story 22. My high school English teacher once said to me, "You couldn't organize a pig to roll in filth." It took another 25 years, but I was eventually diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. All those years of intense shame because I just couldn't seem to function like everyone else. When I was first medicated, I came to realize just how much I had been battling to hold my life together. It was astounding how much easier things were with a clear, quiet mind. I became so angry that I had been living life on hard mode for 40 years. I could have actually made something of myself. Story 23. My 7th grade history teacher told us that when we could not remember a test answer, we should pause and say, "Come, Holy Spirit, enlighten my mind." Saying this would calm my anxiety, and I would remember the correct answer. I still say this anytime I can't recall something. Additionally, Sister Charles would always say after someone had coughed a few times, "It's not the cough that carries you off. It's the coffin they carry you off in." She was the strictest nun in the school, so it was funny to hear her be silly. All my siblings had her, and we often recited this to others who coughed. Because of her demanding excellence in English class, we can still name all the prepositions and forms of the verb to be. I won't list them. Story 24. I was studying theology but had to take some math and science courses. I ended up taking a statistics class that was fantastic, and the professor was amazing. One day, a project was due that I wasn't ready for, so after class, I went to him to explain and ask for an extension. When I was done, he just smiled and said, "No problem. Statistical anomalies happen." I realized that he viewed life as a variety of statistical occurrences, which gave him a sense of grace for people when they didn't meet his expectations. It was one of the best classes I had in college. Story 25. This will get buried, but I had a professor in college who said something unfortunately memorable. Now that is a stupid question. The thing was, I thought it was a poignant question. He was discussing how grades are not nearly as important as life experiences when it comes to getting jobs. He told us a story about how his brother got into Yale, not because of his academic abilities, but because he had hitchhiked his way through Bolivia and slept in ditches. So I asked, from the perspective of my very average and uninteresting life, what if we have never hitchhiked our way through Bolivia and slept in ditches? That's when he said, "Now that is a stupid question." I guess he thought I meant it specifically and literally. He did later apologize, though not in person. I ran into him at a store on Christmas Eve about 10 years later. Once I told him my name, he remembered me perfectly well. Still no clue how you are supposed to make your average life seem interesting. Story 26. Annette Foster was discussing with the class at what point we all become a biological waste of space. It was strangely depressing, yet it created a lively class debate, and most of us found the whole topic highly entertaining. Story 27. It's the way a teacher once responded to me. She said that IQ stood for intelligence quota or something like that. I corrected her, saying it meant intelligence quotient, which my mom had told me before. But she doubled down, and when I said, "But my mom told me," she interrupted me and, in a mocking tone, said, "But my mom told me." It was the first time I got so mad I wanted to punch a teacher in the face. Story 28. A teacher told our entire year group before we left for university that we hadn't met our best friend yet. Many of us laughed. This was 16 years ago. How wrong he was. Story 29. How are you? My English teacher opened the class with this. We talked together. It was 1986. She was a great lady. Story 30. My fourth grade teacher punished me for working ahead in my math book by throwing out all the work I had completed, which was every problem in the entire book about 2 weeks into the year. She made me redo them according to the class schedule. This experience taught me that hard work was for chumps. I still struggle with the inability to work ahead on anything. Story 31. We are teaching you how to do taxes because the school administration refuses to let us officially teach you anything useful. She was fired days later for being an effective teacher. Story 32. A band teacher once said that practice doesn't make perfect. It makes progress. Not just with instruments, but with anything in life. Story 33. She said, "I'm not here to help you. I don't have time to go over it again. So do it on your own time. I paid for your class, which is 2 hours long. You've got plenty of time." Her rating is 1 star for a reason. Story 34. The school where I previously worked had some former students come forward to share that about 30 years earlier, a teacher had discussed the students' breast sizes. The school leaders and nuns offered a sincere apology to those former students. Story 35. A third grade teacher, after I fractured my arm at school and was absent for 1 day, told me that I should not return at all, like yesterday when I came back. A fifth grade teacher, after my uncle passed away and I was on compassionate leave, asked me where I had been for the past week. When I explained and started to tear up, she replied, "Why are you crying? I should be the one crying. Where is my homework?" Story 36. I don't care about your sexual preference. Be who you are, love whoever you want, and so on. I will do my best to defend you, but please act rationally and properly. That's from my English teacher. It's my first time encountering a teacher like that, especially in a Catholic school, not to mention it's her first time in the teaching field. Story 37. My ninth grade Latin teacher looked me in the eye and said, "Freckles are ugly." For no reason whatsoever. I am covered in freckles. For what reason would she say this? I don't know. Guess what? I never learned how to put on makeup. You will have to deal with looking at my freckled face. Story 38. Our science teacher used to tell us stories in class when we were 15 about his trips to Southeast Asia, including Cambodia. I later found out that it was a sex tourism trip, as he was reportedly a pedophile who was surrounded and protected by other offenders at the school. Story 39. I was having a rough time in university, and my philosophy professor told me to take my student leave days to relax. He hit me with a line I won't forget. You're a human being, not a human doing. Story 40. In middle school, a teacher in sex education insisted that eating food from the same plate is a form of sexual contact. To this day, my brother and I joke about being incestuous when we eat chips from the same bowl. Story 41. A middle school science teacher told us that common sense is very uncommon. It was as true as anything she ever taught us. Story 42. The teacher tried to tell us to get into groups of 3. Instead, she told us to get into threesomes. She was an older teacher, so I'm guessing someone misled her about the meaning of the word, but it truly ruined the lesson for me. Story 43. At 13 years old, in a subject we could drop before the General Certificate of Secondary Education, the teacher asked us to raise our hands if we disliked the subject. I, along with about half the class, raised my hand. The teacher then said to me specifically, "I didn't think you felt strongly enough about anything to dislike it. That was unexpected." Yes, I may have a slightly flat affect due to a late diagnosis of autism, but that was just cruel. Nearly 50 years later, friends who were present still say this is the most shocking thing they witnessed a teacher do. For reference, it was a small private school with a very good reputation. The subject was Latin. Story 44. I had a teacher from 4th to 6th grade who would bully students to the point that they ran home crying. I remember her constantly comparing us to her other class and saying how much better they were. Story 45. Approaching the desk of my 10th grade homeroom and geography teacher after being in his class for 6 months, I asked, "Are you in my class?" Story 46. I will never forget the Toad's advice on writing. Plan, write rapidly, and revise carefully. That was 57 years ago. Story 47. This was in the 1960s. A girl in my class always had a tissue in her hand and used tissues on her desk. One day, the teacher just exploded and said, "Melanie, get all that mess out of here." We were all shocked to hear a teacher curse like that. Story 48. In German class, we read the protocols of the Nuremberg trials, where an SS officer mentioned they had up to 15 Jewish people in a 1-by-1 meter cell. Our teacher drew a square on the floor and asked the class to try to fit 15 people in that space. We couldn't do it. This left a lasting impression, and everyone felt sick after that class. Story 49. I can't remember the specific words, so I'll just summarize. Around the time of John Lennon's assassination, our Sunday school teacher criticized him for being anti-Christian because when Lennon was younger, he claimed the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. The teacher used that example to illustrate the evils of rock music and how rock musicians were in league with Satan. He showed no empathy for a brilliant artist who was murdered, leaving his wife a widow and his son without a father. So much for compassionate Christians. Story 50. The teacher did not know the difference between holidays and observed holidays. She told the entire class that I was wrong for saying a holiday was on a Sunday but observed on a Monday. I realized in 3rd grade that teachers are not all-knowing as I had thought. It blew my mind at that young age. Story 51. Shoot the closest bear. This was advice from a professor about what to do when you're overwhelmed and have too many things on your plate. When there is a pack of bears running at you, you address the closest one first. So when there are many tasks you need to complete that make you feel overwhelmed, just focus on the most pressing issue. Aside from that, this professor was not a good teacher, and I use him as an example of the kind of educator I aspire never to be. Nevertheless, that advice still resonates with me, and I use it frequently. Story 52. My senior year English teacher was a big, imposing man, and nobody messed with him. He was also the kindest, gentlest person once you got to know him. One day, while he was teaching, a student got kicked out of the class next door and was sent to stand in the hall. The student stood out there swearing and yelling at his teacher while kicking the door and wall. Our teacher stopped mid-sentence, said, "Excuse me," and walked out to the student in the hall and lectured him. I will never forget his speech. He asked the student what he thought he was doing. I don't even know if the student responded, but my teacher said, "No, what you are doing is interrupting my class, which is my job and how I earn money to take care of my family. Once you bring my family into this, we are no longer student and teacher. We are man to man. Look at you. You can't even look me in the eye, so I strongly suggest you either take your punishment and stand out here in the hall quietly, or you go to the principal's office, but you are not going to interrupt my class again." He then walked back into our classroom, shut the door, walked back to the board, didn't even look at us, and just said, "Okay, that's not for us," as I was saying, and finished his lesson like a boss. To this day, over 30 years later, it is still the most impressive takedown of a rude individual I have ever seen. He was truly one of a kind. Story 53. The math teacher used to say, "It's not likely you will have a calculator in your pocket all the time." I would like to see the look on his face when smartphones became popular. Story 54. In 7th grade, my math teacher informed me that I would receive a 0 for not submitting my assignment. I responded that a 0 was better than nothing, and the entire class laughed. That was in 1976, and I still think about it. Story 55. 1 and 2 plus 2 and 1. Calculus is so much fun. Low and high plus high and low, draw the line and square below. It has been 30 years. The greatest calculus professor ever. Story 56. My freshman history teacher asked us if we would rather live during the rise of a civilization where things may be difficult but improve as the country progresses, or live during the decline of a nation where things start easily and become increasingly difficult. I did not know that the choice had already been made for me. The decline has been, so far, an interesting event to observe. Story 57. In the early 1970s, I had an amazing 5th grade teacher. He taught a unit on critical thinking, focusing on how advertising has influenced our minds. He said, "Even at your young age, you are being bombarded with messages to buy things, and you will remember them for a long time." He demonstrated this by throwing out advertising phrases and having us finish them and name the product. For example, "It's not nice to fool." The answer was Mother Nature, and the product was chiffon margarine. He made it fun but also conveyed the message clearly. Another question he asked was, "What tastes good? Like a cigarette should?" The product was Winston. He had us singing the jingles with just a few word prompts. After all these years, he was right. Those ads remain in my long-term memory. Story 58. In the future, almost all wars will be fought over water, as my geography teacher mentioned during my 7th year in school. Story 59. A college math teacher, while someone was doing a proof on the board, remarked, "That's it. Do it the hard way. You're the type of person who likes to hit your head against the wall repeatedly because it feels so good when you stop. Don't you?" Story 60. I was a smart but lazy student. I hardly ever completed assignments. As a result, teachers looked down on me due to my bad grades in their classes. Except for one time in English class during 11th grade, I submitted a subpar paper, and the teacher pulled me aside, expressing her disappointment. She said, "I have to say, I'm disappointed in you. You are so much better than this, and I was not expecting this type of work from you." While that could be perceived as a criticism, it also made me feel good. Other teachers expected me to perform poorly, and when I did poorly, they were not surprised. However, the fact that this teacher was shocked by my underperformance actually boosted my self-belief. Story 61. I get paid whether you learn or not, and I don't really care either way. She was not a good teacher, to say the least. Story 62. We were going around the room reading parts of a book. When it was my turn, I shrank down in my seat and didn't want to participate because I had severe social anxiety. A group, including one of my bullies, was talking among themselves. The teacher said to them, "Sure, I'm talking to the quiet one. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye."